I'm gonna teach you how to program a peak performance in Olympic weightlifting, and we're gonna start right now. What's up everybody, it's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you wanna get stronger, you wanna be more explosive, you wanna be faster, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So have you sat there and designed a program? You've laid out months and months of training. You've thought through every single aspect of training that you could possibly create, and you've worked your athlete through every single step-by-step process, and you've gotten to the point of that competition. You've led into this big moment. You want to see all the hard work come to fruition, and then your athlete fails. Your whole plan crumbles. You feel horrible as a coach. You feel horrible for your athletes, and you just feel like a massive failure. This is something that's so consistent throughout Olympic weightlifting, throughout coaching in general, is designing programs around peak performance can be incredibly difficult. And a lot of the reasons why it's difficult is because there's a lot of shortcomings in the various modalities of periodization that we're currently utilizing in the world of sports performance. And if we can think about initially, what is peak performance, right? What is a peak? If we can think about it from a traditional sense, a peak performance would be you develop an athlete over 12 to 16 weeks, you work through all these blocks, you see how they're adapting, you know what exercises they need to perform at their peak, you know how to cut out volume, you know how to add in intensity, you know how to play around with all these different variables so that when that competition happens in 12 or 16 weeks, they can achieve the highest level of result possible in that specific moment. And that's a very, very challenging task that every coach has to face when we're designing an Olympic weightlifting peak. And the biggest problem behind this is a lot of coaches struggle with where do we even start? How do you actually lay out that peak program? How can you sit there and say, hey, where do we even begin? And I think let's start right now with a hypothetical situation. Let's say that we have a perfect 16-week program. We've got 16 weeks until that main event, right? So if we're using proper periodization, we've got to factor in multiple different aspects of the weightlifter. We've got to establish those key performance indicators, right? We've got to establish those KPIs where we can sit there and say, we know that the main things that we're going to build upon are going to be the snatch and the clean and jerk. Those are the main things that we're being tested for, right? The Olympic weightlifter is only being tested in competition for snatch, for clean and jerk. So we've got to start to establish what can we do in training to push the snatch, to push the clean and jerk, what strength exercises, what variations, and all these factors start to come into play, and what type of person are we dealing with. And that is that first step that you've got to take as a coach. So starting with that fifth key factor, we've got to recognize what types of variations that individual needs to improve their competitive lifts. So in a system of training, there's going to be variations that we can utilize to improve technique, to improve feeling, to improve speed, to improve strength. So you've got to take a step back as a coach and say, all right, this individual needs this specific variation when they are peaking. I'm going to use an example. Haley Reichert has been a lifter for us. She's made a senior Pan Am team. She's the youngest American female to ever clean and jerk double body weight. One of the key factors behind her winning the third place medal at the Junior World Championships was us taking a step back and saying, hey, when she does high hang snatches, she tends to compete really, really well with those heavier snatches. She does really, really well with high hang snatches. So we need to factor that in, that we build her high hang snatch up during those last 4 weeks so that when we're heading into that main event, that Junior World Championships, she's got a lot of confidence. She feels that big, strong finish. And now she feels powerful when she's getting on the platform to smash those snatches. And that's all because of the work we had done with those high hang snatches. Another good example, maybe you have someone who gets crashed on with the clean. The clean smashes them and they fold like an accordion. Perhaps they need something like 2-box cleans. Maybe they need power cleans. Maybe they need a power clean into a full clean complex, something along these lines. But if you can figure out early on in that 16-week block, maybe it's on block 2, which would be the comprehension phase, you start to see they're crashing and they're clean, and you start to give them power cleans. And then later on, you can give them those power cleans again just to reinforce that good optimal movement so they can compete very, very well. That fourth key aspect that all coaches have to think about when they're peaking their Olympic weightlifters is how do they respond to strength movements? Okay, so a lot of people think that we've got to get our squat as high as possible. We've got to push our squat to this absolute max. And we've even heard stories of Piros Demos back squatting 320 kilos. And the ironic part behind this is that Piros himself has said he back squatted too much. He was too strong with his back squat. He didn't need to back squat over 300 kilos. That's crazy, right? And one of the things that I've learned from Norik Vardanian is he himself has said multiple different times, hey, when you're heading into a big competition, you want to hit those big doubles or triples maybe 6 weeks out. So you're going pretty heavy 6 weeks out. That's going to establish your strength levels. When you're getting into a comp, it's actually a little bit more effective that 2 weeks out, maybe you hit a PR 5 rep max, because now you're gonna have those legs later on in the clean and jerk. So now we're taking that strength movement and we're understanding if someone does get fatigued later on in the clean and jerks, we should be working on their 5 rep max. If somebody else, maybe they get smashed when they're cleaning, we've got to build their front squat to a heavy triple or a heavy set of 5. And that's the key component here behind those strength movements. Another aspect, maybe you have a lifter who struggles with heavy weights off of the floor. See how they respond to heavy clean pulls. Some lifters do really, really well when they're doing very heavy clean pulls. They feel confident. If they feel a heavy weight, they don't care because they're used to it with clean pulls. Other lifters struggle with heavy clean pulls because it can displace their movement. It can actually have a negative impact on their technique. So you've got to understand how strength movements impact that individual athlete's performance. That third key aspect is understanding volume and intensity. Again, the traditional aspect of peaking is smash people with intensity and then back off with the intensity. So the last 5 to 10 days, their volume and their intensity is super low. You're super deloaded, and now you're gonna go into this peak, right? And that works for a lot of lifters. It is effective for a lot of lifters, but it also ruins a lot of lifters. A lot of lifters go into competitions feeling flat. They haven't felt the load, or they get gassed in their first clean and jerk because they haven't had a lot of volume. And you've got to figure out what type of athlete are you dealing with. If you're dealing with a CrossFitter, take someone, for example, like Colt Armstrong. He came to us, he was pathetically weak. We got him to snatch 155 kilos and clean and jerk 190 kilos. And one of the big factors behind Colt, he came from a CrossFit and swimming background. So what does that mean? That means he can handle volume. That means we've got to push volume in his training when he's actually leading into a peak. If we deload him 3 or 4 weeks out and then we slowly build that volume up, now he's going to hit a good, strong peak. But if we follow the traditional sense, we would actually be ruining him. Same if you have a lifter who comes from wrestling or gymnastics. They can handle a ton of volume because they've been in really, really difficult sports. Now, if you get someone who comes from the sport of track and field, maybe they're a shot putter. Shot putters can barely handle volume because they're bigger. They get beat up a little bit easier. They're a little lazy because all shot putters are lazy, right? We just want to lift heavy weights over 1 to 3 reps. So they're not going to respond very well to volume. They'll respond very well to intensity. So as coaches, we can't follow a traditional sense of peaking. We've got to see how that individual athlete responds to volume and how they respond to intensity. That second key factor is, how does your athlete actually adapt? How many days does it take the athlete to adapt to various different movements? And understanding this comes back to, how many days do you have an athlete that might be sore after a heavy back squat or after a 5-rep max on a back squat? Are they sore for 2 days? Are they sore for 4 days? Are they not sore at all? So if we can start to factor that in from an individualized perspective, now we can understand how they react and how they adapt to the different forms of stimuli. If you have someone who maybe you're doing a low hang snatch, you might have short leg lifters, their back gets sore, their upper back gets sore because they're trying to finish a little bit more because their hamstrings aren't as strong. Well, now you can start to see, all right, well, when we do low hang snatches, it takes them 3 or 4 days to recover. So you probably shouldn't do that during the summit phase of training. You should probably do that earlier on during the comprehension phase so that they can improve their technique from that perspective. But on top of that, you're getting information, you're getting data points on how they adapt. And it's so important to recognize that some athletes might take a week to adapt to stimuli and other athletes might only take a day, and that helps you set up that peak even more effectively. So before we get into that number one factor behind peaking our athletes, it's important that we recognize that these are all problems that coaches have. These are all issues coaches have when going into periodization. And that's specifically why we put together our parabolic periodization textbook and course to help coaches figure out the absolute best way to peak athletes, to lay out their programs, to develop these athletes to reach that international stage so that they can become champions. If you click on the link down below, you can head over to garagestrength.com and you can pick up your textbook and course specifically for parabolic periodization. Finally, that number one factor behind peaking athletes in the sport of Olympic weightlifting, and I believe in all sports, is figuring out what type of athlete you're working with. So it's important to understand that there's 3 different types of athletes. If you click on the link down below, you can get a free graphic. It's known as the Athlete Reactive Analysis, and it's going to lay this out specifically. But in parabolic periodization, there's 3 different athletes. There's the meathead, okay, that's athlete type 3. There's the fragile athlete, that's athlete type 2. There's the Zen athlete, that's athlete type 1. And if you can think about it, athlete 3, the meathead, they're gonna be the ones that come in, they're hitting massive snatch PRs, they're slamming the bar, and every single day they're going for broke. And every single day they're going for broke. There's athlete type 2. These are the fragile athletes. They want to come in and they want to tell you all of their life problems. They want to tell you that they're never going to hit a PR ever again. They want to tell you that the whole world is against them and their life's terrible. All of these things are just stacked up against them, and then they go and they hit PRs, right, in training, and you're just sitting there as a coach like, dude, you just told me your life was over, and 30 minutes later you're hitting a snatch PR. So that's the fragile athlete, and that's okay. A lot of people are wired that way. And that athlete type 1, that's a Zen athlete. That's the athlete who will do everything that you ask as a coach. They'll go in and they'll just smash their warm-ups, they'll smash their attempts in training, they'll do every technical change that you need. That's athlete type 1, the Zen athlete. And the key is understanding how each one works from a perspective of how do they handle cues? Can they handle negative cues? Can they handle positive cues? Do they need neutral cues? Whatever it is, you know what type of cues to give that specific athlete. Because when you're peaking an athlete, if I have a fragile athlete and I've done everything right for 16 straight weeks and we're about to peak, we're about to walk out onto the platform, and I say one negative thing to that individual, that could completely destroy their confidence. Everything that we've done over the last 16 weeks goes out the window, and their performance is completely negated because I gave them that one negative comment before they were about to take that attempt, and you don't do that. But the only reason you know not to do that is because you've established what type of athlete you're working with. So make sure that you understand how to type your athlete. Who's athlete 1? Who's the Zen athlete? Who's the fragile athlete? Who's the meathead athlete? Make sure you figure all of that out, and that's going to help you lead to a monster peak. So again, we put all this information to help coaches solve all their periodization problems in our Parabolic Periodization book and course. If you head over to garagestrength.com, you can pick that up. If you want more information about Olympic weightlifting training, you can click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.